On September 16th, 2025, the world of cinema fell silent as Robert Redford, an enduring monument of Hollywood and one of the most influential figures in film history, passed away at the age of 89 at his home in Sundance, Utah. He died peacefully in his sleep, but the grief his passing unleashed was anything but quiet, rippling across the globe through countless tributes from colleagues, admirers, and audiences who had been moved by his work for more than 6 decades. To many, he was not simply an actor, but a cultural force who helped shape American cinema, a visionary who founded Sundance, and a man whose presence embodied both elegance and integrity. The loss of Redford feels like the closing of a golden age, the extinguishing of a flame that once illuminated generations with light, truth, and art. Childhood shadows and early losses. Robert Redford was born on August 18, 1936, in Santa Monica, California, into a modest household where his father, Charles, worked as an accountant, and his mother, Martha, nurtured his love of creativity and possibility. Yet Redford's childhood was shadowed by hardship, including a bout with polio at age 11 that left him temporarily paralysed and taught him the fragility of life at an early age. His mother's devotion, massaging his stiff legs each night until he regained strength, left him with an enduring lesson in resilience. That resilience was tested again in 1955, when Redford, just 18, lost his mother during a medical procedure, a blow that devastated him and left the household steeped in silence. These early experiences of illness and grief became the quiet foundation of his artistry, giving his later performances the depth and humanity of someone who understood loss long before fame found him. Searching for purpose, restless and rebellious, Redford earned a baseball scholarship to the University of Colorado, but quickly lost it due to drinking and lack of discipline, forcing him to confront the uncertainty of his future. Rather than surrender, he travelled through Europe, sketching, painting and living, simply while absorbing the culture of France, Italy and Spain. In Florence, he studied painting. In Paris, he embraced new ideas, and across his wanderings he discovered that art could become both survival and salvation. When he returned to the United States in the late 1950s, he carried both scars and conviction, enrolling at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York. Acting was not an instant revelation. It was grueling work, with small television roles in Maverick, Perry Mason, and The Twilight Zone barely keeping him afloat. Yet every line delivered and every rehearsal endured marked his refusal to surrender to the shadows of his past, planting the seeds of a resilience that would carry him through the heights and heartbreaks of Hollywood. Broadway breakthrough. For a time, Redford's looks were as much a curse as a gift, with casting directors dismissing him as too handsome for depth. That perception changed in 1963 when he starred in Neil Simon's Broadway hit Barefoot in the Park, playing the witty, tender Paul Bratter opposite Elizabeth Ashley. Night after night, audiences responded, not just to his charm, but to the vulnerability and intelligence that pulsed beneath it. The play's success liberated him from the stereotype of a pretty face and announced him as a serious actor. Hollywood soon came calling, and Redford transitioned into film with performances that built steadily until his breakthrough alongside Paul Newman in Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid, 1969. As the Sundance Kid, he embodied a blend of mischief, intelligence, and heart that captivated audiences worldwide and gave him the nickname that would follow him for the rest of his life. Defining a generation. The 1970s cemented Redford as one of the defining actors of his generation, with performances that balanced star power and social conscience. In Jeremiah Johnson, 1972, he portrayed a solitary mountain man searching for peace in wilderness, reflecting his own love for nature. In The Candidate, 1972, he peeled back the layers of political ambition, while The Way We Were, 1973, gave audiences a bittersweet romance with Barbra Streisand that remains iconic. That same year, The Sting reunited him with Paul Newman and earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. Perhaps most importantly, All the President's Men, 1976, established Redford not just as a star, but as a cultural voice, dramatising the Watergate scandal and reminding audiences that cinema could serve as both entertainment and conscience. Each role showed his determination to choose substance over glamour, a path that demanded courage but cemented his reputation as one of Hollywood's most serious and thoughtful artists. A new chapter. Behind the camera. By the late 1970s, Redford was no longer satisfied with acting alone. His directorial debut, Ordinary People, 1980, stunned Hollywood with its raw, intimate portrait of grief and family silence, earning him the Academy Award for Best Director. He proved that he was not only capable of performing before the camera, but also of guiding stories from behind it with depth and discipline. Later works, like A River Runs Through It, 1992, Quiz Show, 1994, and The Horse Whisperer, 1998, further demonstrated his versatility, weaving together themes of family, morality, and humanity's relationship with nature. While not every project found unanimous acclaim, his work as a director consistently reflected his core values: honesty, restraint, and a deep belief in the power of cinema to reflect truth. For Redford, directing was both a continuation and an expansion of his artistic journey, a way to control the stories he felt needed to be told. Building Sundance. Perhaps Redford's greatest contribution to cinema came with the founding of the Sundance Institute in 1981 and the subsequent Sundance Film Festival. What began as a small experiment in Utah became the beating heart of independent film, nurturing voices that mainstream Hollywood overlooked. Through Sundance, filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino, Steven Soderbergh, Chloe Zhao, and many more found their first platform, launching a movement that transformed cinema worldwide. Redford poured his own money and reputation into keeping Sundance alive during its fragile beginnings, and for him it was never about personal glory. It was about creating a sanctuary where new voices could thrive, where art could exist without compromise, and where risk was rewarded rather than punished. Today, Sundance stands as a living monument to his vision, proof that one man's determination can change the course of an entire industry. Love, family, and loss. While Redford's public career dazzled with success, his private life was often marked by heartbreak. He married Lola Van Wagenen in 1958, and together they raised 4 children, but the loss of their infant son Scott left scars that never healed. Their second son, James, endured a lifelong struggle with liver disease before passing away in 2020 at the age of 58, a loss Redford described as one of the greatest sorrows of his life. Despite these tragedies, his daughters Shauna and Amy pursued artistic paths of their own, carrying forward the family's creative legacy. Redford and Lola divorced in 1985 after 27 years, but he always spoke of her with respect and gratitude, crediting her as a pillar of strength during the most difficult years. In later life, he found companionship with German artist Sibylle Zagars, whom he married in 2009, and together they collaborated on artistic and environmental projects, creating a late chapter of love and peace after decades of turbulence. The weight of grief. Redford often acknowledged that the losses he endured shaped not only his character, but also his art. The death of his sons, the collapse of his first marriage, and the passing of close friends like Natalie Wood and Paul Newman each left wounds that never fully healed. Yet, rather than allow grief to silence him, he transformed it into fuel for his work, infusing his roles and his directing with a depth that resonated precisely because it came from lived experience. He once said that resilience is not loud, but the quiet choice to move forward even when fear and sorrow have every argument in their favour. That philosophy carried him through decades of public success and private struggle, and it is why his films, whether romantic, political, or deeply introspective, always carried a core of authenticity that audiences felt in their bones. Final years in stillness. In his final years, Redford stepped back from the spotlight, focusing instead on painting, environmental advocacy, and the quiet life he shared with Sibylle. He remained engaged with Sundance, voicing concern about its future in an industry increasingly dominated by commerce, but also pride in what it had become. Health challenges, including COPD, slowed him physically, yet his mind remained sharp and his sense of purpose unshaken. Those who visited him in Utah described a man at peace, content to look out over the mountains he loved, often waking in the early hours to sit silently by a window, lost in memory and reflection. When he passed away in 2025, it was in that same place of stillness, surrounded by the nature he cherished and the legacy he had built. Tributes and legacy. The announcement of Redford's passing brought an outpouring of tributes from every corner of the globe. Jane Fonda remembered him as a man of both heart and intellect. Meryl Streep praised his authenticity, and countless independent filmmakers expressed gratitude for the opportunities Sundance had given them. Fans revisited classics like The Sting, The Way We Were, and All the President's Men, sharing memories of how his performances had touched their lives. The Sundance Institute vowed to honour his mission by continuing to champion new voices, and environmental organisations recalled his decades of advocacy for conservation. The response revealed not only admiration for his work, but deep appreciation for the man himself, an artist who never lost sight of his responsibility to use his platform for something greater than fame. Conclusion. A legend's flame. Robert Redford's life was one of extraordinary contrasts: beauty and grief, triumph and loss, public acclaim and private struggle. He was the Sundance Kid, the director of Ordinary People, the founder of a festival that changed cinema, and the father who carried unimaginable sorrow with quiet dignity. His death at 89 closed a monumental chapter in Hollywood history, but his legacy endures in the films he made, the artists he inspired, and the ideals he carried into every project. He proved that true greatness is not measured by fame or wealth, but by the courage to live authentically, to turn pain into art, and to create space for others to shine. As the curtain falls on his extraordinary journey, we honour Robert Redford not just as a star, but as a man whose flame will continue to burn through every story told in his wake.